Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of making a difference in the world. As a 28-year-old military intelligence analyst, she believed her work in Iraq could help bring peace to a war-torn region. The morning of October 15th started like any other day at the forward operating base near Fallujah. She reviewed intelligence reports, analyzed enemy movements, and prepared for what seemed like a routine convoy mission to deliver supplies to local schools. The desert sun was already blazing hot when Sarah climbed into the armored vehicle. She was part of a 6-person team tasked with escorting humanitarian aid to children who had been without proper school supplies for months. The convoy included 2 Humvees and a supply truck, all heavily armored and equipped with the latest communication equipment. Sarah felt confident in her team's preparation and training. As they drove through the dusty streets of Fallujah, Sarah noticed how the local people watched them from doorways and windows. Some children waved, while others simply stared with curious eyes. The city showed signs of the ongoing conflict everywhere: bullet holes in walls, abandoned buildings, and streets lined with concrete barriers. Despite the obvious dangers, Sarah felt hopeful about their mission to help the local community. The convoy had traveled about 12 miles when everything changed in an instant. The lead vehicle suddenly exploded in a massive fireball as it hit a hidden roadside bomb. The blast was so powerful that it flipped the heavy armored vehicle completely over, sending twisted metal and debris flying in all directions. Sarah's vehicle, following closely behind, was immediately caught in a deadly crossfire from multiple directions. Enemy fighters had positioned themselves in buildings on both sides of the narrow street, creating a perfect killing zone. Automatic weapons fire erupted from every direction, with bullets striking their vehicle like deadly rain. The sound was deafening, a constant thundering of gunfire mixed with the screams of wounded soldiers and the crackle of radio communications, requesting immediate backup and medical evacuation. Sarah tried to return fire through her window. While calling for air support on her radio, she could see muzzle flashes from at least 8 different positions around them. The enemy had clearly planned this ambush carefully, waiting for the convoy to enter the most vulnerable part of the street before launching their attack. The 3rd vehicle in their convoy was also taking heavy fire, with smoke beginning to pour from its engine compartment. Within minutes, Sarah realized their situation was desperate. 3 of her team members were already wounded, and their vehicle's armor was starting to fail under the constant barrage of enemy fire. She made the difficult decision to attempt an escape on foot, hoping to reach better cover in a nearby building and call for evacuation. As she prepared to exit the vehicle, she had no idea that the next few seconds would change her life forever. The enemy fighters had been waiting for exactly this moment. As Sarah opened the vehicle door, a sniper positioned in a building across the street had her directly in his sights. The ambush was about to become even more deadly, and Sarah was walking directly into the most dangerous moment of her life. Her training had prepared her for many scenarios, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen next. The streets of Fallujah were about to witness an act of violence that would shock even seasoned combat veterans. Sarah stepped out of the vehicle, weapon ready, completely unaware that multiple enemy fighters were tracking her every movement. The next few minutes would test every survival instinct she possessed and push her beyond the limits of human endurance. As she moved toward what she hoped would be safer cover, Sarah couldn't know that her fellow soldiers were already planning a rescue mission that would become legendary among special operations forces. The events about to unfold would demonstrate both the brutal reality of war and the extraordinary lengths that soldiers will go to save one of their own. The moment Sarah stepped out of the damaged vehicle, time seemed to slow down around her. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as she scanned the buildings ahead, looking for the safest route to cover. The acrid smell of smoke and burning fuel filled her nostrils, while the taste of dust and fear coated her mouth. Every instinct told her to move quickly, but her training demanded she move carefully and deliberately. She had taken only 3 steps when the first bullet found its mark. The impact hit her left shoulder like a sledgehammer, spinning her around and sending her rifle flying from her hands. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but Sarah forced herself to keep moving. She stumbled forward, trying to reach a concrete barrier about 20 feet away that could provide some protection from the sniper fire. The second bullet struck her in the back, just below her right shoulder blade. This time the impact drove her to her knees, but somehow she managed to keep crawling toward cover. Blood was beginning to soak through her uniform, and she could feel her strength starting to fade. Still, she refused to give up. In her mind, she kept repeating the survival training she had received. Never stop moving. Never give up. Always fight to live. Bullets 3 and 4 hit her almost simultaneously as she tried to pull herself behind the concrete barrier. One struck her in the left leg, shattering her thigh bone, while the other tore through her right arm. The pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced, but Sarah gritted her teeth and continued trying to reach safety. She could hear her team members shouting her name from their vehicle, but the enemy fire was too intense for them to reach her. The 5th through 8th bullets found their target as Sarah finally collapsed behind the barrier. Each impact felt like being hit with a baseball bat, and she could feel her body going into shock. Her vision was starting to blur, and she was having trouble breathing. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth, and she realized that at least one bullet had punctured her lung. Still, she managed to pull out her radio and call for help. With her remaining strength, Sarah tried to apply pressure to her worst wounds while staying conscious long enough to provide her exact location to the rescue teams. Bullets 9 and 10 struck the concrete barrier above her head, showering her with sharp fragments that cut her face and hands. The enemy fighters were closing in, and she could hear their voices getting closer as they moved from building to building. The 11th bullet grazed her head, leaving a deep cut across her scalp and causing blood to pour down into her eyes. Sarah wiped the blood away with her good hand and tried to assess her situation. She was trapped behind minimal cover, seriously wounded and running out of ammunition. The enemy knew exactly where she was, and it was only a matter of time before they would have a clear shot to finish her off. Bullets 12 and 13 came from a different direction as more enemy fighters joined the attack. One struck her in the abdomen, while the other shattered her left ankle. Sarah felt her consciousness beginning to fade as blood loss and shock took their toll on her body. She managed to whisper one final message into her radio, giving her location and telling her team that she loved them all like family. The 14th bullet hit her in the chest, just inches from her heart. The impact was so severe that it knocked her completely unconscious and sent her sliding down behind the concrete barrier. To anyone watching, Sarah Martinez appeared to be dead. Blood pooled around her motionless body and she showed no signs of life. The enemy fighters, convinced they had killed the American soldier, began to retreat from the area before more coalition forces could arrive. For several minutes, Sarah lay completely still behind the barrier. Her breathing was so shallow that it was almost undetectable, and her pulse was barely strong enough to keep her alive. Her body had gone into survival mode, shutting down all non-essential functions to preserve what little life remained in her damaged organs. She was balanced on the very edge between life and death. When the rescue team finally reached her position 20 minutes later, the medic initially thought they were recovering a body. Sarah had no pulse that they could detect. Her breathing was imperceptible and she had lost an enormous amount of blood. However, protocol required them to attempt life-saving measures regardless. So they immediately began emergency medical treatment while calling for an urgent helicopter evacuation. As the medical team worked frantically to stabilize her, Sarah's body began to respond to their efforts. Deep in her subconscious mind, her will to survive was still fighting, even though her body appeared to have given up. The next 48 hours would determine whether her incredible determination would be enough to overcome 14 gunshot wounds and massive blood loss. The helicopter ride to the field hospital was a nightmare of medical chaos and desperate hope. Sarah's body lay strapped to a stretcher, surrounded by medics who worked frantically to keep blood flowing through her damaged organs. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped constantly, monitoring every weak heartbeat and shallow breath. The flight medic had seen many wounded soldiers, but Sarah's condition was among the worst he had ever encountered. During the 20-minute flight, Sarah's heart stopped twice. Each time the medical team performed CPR and used electric shocks to restart her heart, bringing her back from the brink of death through sheer determination and medical skill. Her blood pressure was dangerously low, and they had already given her multiple transfusions just to replace what she had lost on the battlefield. The medics knew that time was running out fast. At the field hospital, a team of military surgeons was already prepared for Sarah's arrival. They had been briefed on her condition during the flight, and knew they were facing one of the most challenging cases of their careers. As the helicopter landed, they rushed Sarah directly into the operating room, where a 12-hour battle to save her life was about to begin. The surgical team discovered that the 14 bullets had caused devastating damage throughout Sarah's body. Her left lung had collapsed completely, Her liver was lacerated in 3 places and several major blood vessels had been severed. One bullet had missed her heart by less than an inch, while another had fractured her spine dangerously close to her spinal cord. The surgeons worked in shifts, carefully removing bullet fragments and repairing damaged organs piece by piece. During the surgery, Sarah's condition deteriorated several times. Her blood pressure dropped to critical levels, and her kidneys began to shut down from the trauma and blood loss. The medical team had to make difficult decisions about which injuries to treat first, knowing that they might not have time to address them all. They worked with incredible precision and speed, racing against time to save a fellow soldier's life. Meanwhile, word of Sarah's condition spread throughout the military base. Soldiers who had never met her personally began donating blood to help with her treatment. Her story of survival against impossible odds inspired everyone who heard it, and many began referring to her as a miracle. However, the medical team remained cautiously pessimistic about her chances of survival. After the initial surgery, Sarah was placed in intensive care, where she remained unconscious and connected to life support machines. Her body was fighting infections from her wounds, and her brain showed signs of swelling from the head injury she had sustained. The doctors told her family that even if she survived, she might face permanent disabilities including paralysis, brain damage, or the loss of limbs. For the next day and a half, Sarah existed in a state between life and death. Her vital signs fluctuated constantly, sometimes improving enough to give hope, then crashing again without warning. The medical staff monitored her around the clock, adjusting medications and providing treatments to support her damaged organs. Her family was flown in from the United States expecting to say their final goodbyes. During this critical period, something remarkable began to happen in Sarah's unconscious mind. Despite the massive trauma to her body, her brain began to show increased activity. Medical monitors detected patterns that suggested she was dreaming, and occasionally her eyes would move rapidly beneath her closed eyelids. The doctors couldn't explain it, but Sarah seemed to be fighting her way back to consciousness through sheer willpower. On the second day after the attack, Sarah's condition began to stabilize slightly. Her blood pressure improved, her breathing became stronger, and some of the swelling in her brain started to decrease. The medical team was amazed by her body's resilience and began to express cautious optimism about her survival. However, they knew that even if she lived, her recovery would be long and difficult. Unknown to the medical team treating Sarah, her fellow soldiers were already planning something extraordinary. Word of the ambush had reached special operations units throughout the region, and many had personal connections to members of Sarah's team. The attack had killed 2 soldiers and wounded 3 others, but Sarah's situation was the most desperate. Her fellow service members were not going to let her sacrifice go unanswered. As Sarah fought for her life in the hospital, intelligence officers were gathering information about the enemy fighters responsible for the ambush. They were tracking communications, analyzing the attack patterns, and identifying the leaders of the group that had nearly killed their fellow soldier. What they were discovering would soon lead to one of the most intense rescue and revenge missions in recent military history. The medical monitors showed Sarah's heart rate increasing slightly, as if some part of her unconscious mind sensed that help was coming. Deep in her coma, she was fighting to survive long enough to see justice served and to return home to her family. The next 24 hours would determine whether her incredible will to live would be enough to overcome the devastating injuries that should have killed her. At a classified military compound 50 miles from the field hospital, Commander Jake Morrison received the intelligence report that would change everything. As the leader of SEAL Team 7, Morrison had built his reputation on impossible missions and bringing his people home safely. When he read the details of Sarah's ambush and saw the photographs of her injuries, something cold and determined settled in his chest. This wasn't just another military operation. This was personal. Morrison's team had worked with Sarah's intelligence unit several times over the past year. She had provided critical information that had saved countless lives and helped them complete dangerous missions successfully. Sarah was known throughout the special operations community as someone who cared deeply about protecting soldiers in the field. Now she was fighting for her life because of enemy fighters who had specifically targeted her unit. The intelligence report revealed that the ambush had been carefully planned by a terrorist cell led by a man known as Abu Hassan. This group had been responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces, and they had specifically targeted Sarah's convoy because they knew it contained intelligence personnel. Hassan had bragged to his followers that killing American intelligence officers would deal a major blow to coalition operations in the region. Morrison gathered his 12-man team in the briefing room and laid out the situation with military precision. The enemy fighters were holed up in a fortified compound in the most dangerous part of Fallujah, surrounded by civilians and protected by an extensive network of roadside bombs and defensive positions. Any conventional military assault would result in massive casualties and might not succeed in capturing the targets alive. The SEAL team had a different approach in mind. They would infiltrate the city under cover of darkness, using stealth and surprise to reach the enemy compound before Hassan's group knew they were coming. Their mission had two objectives: capture Hassan and his lieutenants alive for interrogation, and send a clear message that attacks on American intelligence personnel would be met with swift and overwhelming retaliation. Team member Rodriguez, the team's medic, had visited Sarah in the hospital before the mission briefing. He reported that she was still unconscious but showing signs of improvement. The doctors believed she might survive, but her recovery would take months or possibly years. Rodriguez told the team that Sarah's family was keeping a constant vigil at her bedside, praying for her to wake up and return to them safely. As Morrison finalized the mission plan, he emphasized that this operation was about more than revenge. Sarah had risked her life to support special operations teams, and now it was their turn to support her. Every member of the team volunteered for what they knew would be an extremely dangerous mission, with a high probability of casualties. They were willing to risk everything to ensure that Sarah's sacrifice would not go unanswered. The team spent 18 hours preparing for the mission, studying satellite images of the target area and rehearsing their assault plan. They would insert by helicopter several miles outside the city, then move on foot through enemy territory to reach Hassan's compound. The operation would require them to navigate through areas filled with roadside bombs, enemy patrols, and civilian populations that might be hostile to American forces. Intelligence reports indicated that Hassan was planning to leave Fallujah within 48 hours, potentially escaping to a neighboring country, where he would be beyond the reach of coalition forces. This meant the SEAL team had only one chance to capture him before he disappeared. The pressure to succeed was enormous, but Morrison's team had never failed to complete a mission when American lives were at stake. On the evening before the mission, Morrison visited Sarah in the hospital intensive care unit. She lay surrounded by machines and medical equipment, her body still bearing the visible signs of her 14 gunshot wounds. Her face was pale and peaceful, showing no signs of the pain she had endured. Morrison stood beside her bed for several minutes, making a silent promise that Hassan would pay for what he had done. The medical staff told Morrison that Sarah's condition had improved slightly over the past day. Her brain activity was increasing, and there were signs that she might regain consciousness soon. However, they warned that even if she woke up, she would face a long and difficult recovery process. The physical therapy alone could take years, and there was no guarantee she would ever fully recover from her injuries. As Morrison left the hospital, he carried with him a renewed determination to succeed in the upcoming mission. Sarah had shown incredible courage and determination in surviving her wounds, and now his team would show the same qualities in hunting down those responsible. The enemy fighters had made a fatal mistake when they decided to target American intelligence personnel. They had awakened the fury of the most elite fighting force in the world. Back at the base, final preparations were underway for what would become known as Operation Desert Justice. Equipment was checked and rechecked, ammunition was distributed, and communication protocols were established. Each team member wrote a letter to their family, following standard procedure for high-risk missions. They knew that some of them might not return from Fallujah, but they also knew that Sarah deserved justice. As the sun set over the Iraqi desert, Morrison's team prepared to board the helicopters that would take them into enemy territory. They carried with them the hopes and prayers of every soldier who had heard Sarah's story. In a few hours, the streets of Fallujah would witness a demonstration of military precision and determination that would be remembered for years to come. The helicopters lifted off from the base at exactly 0200 hours, their rotors cutting through the cool desert air as they carried Morrison's team toward their destiny in Fallujah. The pilots flew low and fast, using terrain features to mask their approach from enemy radar and observation posts. In the cargo bay, the 12 SEALs sat in focused silence, each man mentally reviewing his part of the mission plan that could bring justice for Sarah. The insertion point was a dried riverbed 3 miles outside the city, chosen because intelligence indicated it was not patrolled by enemy forces. As the helicopters touched down briefly, the SEALs quickly deployed and disappeared into the darkness like ghosts. Within seconds, the aircraft were airborne again, leaving no trace that American Special Forces were now moving toward the heart of enemy territory. Morrison led his team through the desert terrain with practiced stealth, navigating by GPS and night vision equipment. Each step was carefully planned to avoid detection by the network of sentries and electronic surveillance that Hassan's group had established around their stronghold. The team moved in single file, communicating through hand signals and maintaining absolute silence as they approached the outskirts of Fallujah. The city presented a maze of narrow streets, abandoned buildings, and hidden dangers that would challenge even the most experienced urban warfare specialists. Intelligence reports had identified at least 30 roadside bombs planted along the main routes into Hassan's neighborhood, forcing the SEALs to find alternative paths through areas that had not been mapped by previous reconnaissance missions. As they entered the city, the team encountered their first enemy patrol, 3 fighters armed with automatic weapons who were guarding a key intersection. Morrison's point man, Sergeant Collins, eliminated all 3 enemies silently using his knife, ensuring that no alarm would be raised to warn Hassan of their approach. The bodies were quickly hidden, and the team continued deeper into the urban battlefield. The streets of Fallujah were eerily quiet, with most civilians locked safely inside their homes. However, the SEALs knew that enemy fighters could be hiding in any building, ready to spring an ambush similar to the one that had nearly killed Sarah. Every doorway and window represented a potential threat, requiring constant vigilance and split-second decision-making as they moved through the hostile environment. 2 hours into their movement, the team discovered that Hassan had more security than intelligence reports had indicated. Hidden cameras and motion sensors had been placed throughout the neighborhood, creating an early warning system that could alert the enemy to any approaching coalition forces. Morrison made the decision to disable these devices one by one, a time-consuming process that added significant risk to their mission. The team's explosives expert, Petty Officer Williams, carefully dismantled each surveillance device they encountered, ensuring that their approach would remain undetected. Meanwhile, other team members provided security and watched for enemy patrols that might discover their presence. The work was painstakingly slow, but it was essential for maintaining the element of surprise that would be crucial to their mission's success. As dawn approached, Morrison realized they were running out of time to reach Hassan's compound before daylight would make their movement much more dangerous. He made the difficult decision to accelerate their advance, accepting higher risks in order to maintain their timeline. The team began moving more aggressively through the streets, using their superior training and equipment to overcome the obstacles in their path. The enemy compound came into view just as the first hints of sunrise began to illuminate the eastern sky. Hassan's stronghold was a 3-story building surrounded by concrete walls and defensive positions that could house dozens of fighters. Intelligence indicated that Hassan and his key lieutenants were inside, along with weapons and information that could prevent future attacks on coalition forces. Morrison positioned his team around the compound, with snipers taking overwatch positions and assault teams preparing to breach the main entrances simultaneously. The plan called for overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. They would capture Hassan alive if possible, but they were prepared to eliminate him if he posed a threat to civilian lives or attempted to escape with critical intelligence information. As the team prepared for the assault, Morrison received a radio message from the base that changed everything. Sarah had regained consciousness during the night and was asking about her team members who had been wounded in the ambush. The medical staff reported that her first words upon waking were questions about whether her fellow soldiers were safe and whether the enemy responsible had been captured. This news gave Morrison's team additional motivation as they prepared to storm Hassan's compound. They were not just seeking justice for a wounded comrade. They were fulfilling a promise to a fellow soldier who had shown incredible courage and determination in surviving her ordeal. Sarah was awake and recovering, which meant their mission had even greater meaning than they had originally understood. The assault began at exactly 5:45 hours, with explosive charges simultaneously breaching 3 different entrances to the compound. Flashbang grenades disoriented the defenders as the SEALs poured through the openings with overwhelming firepower and tactical superiority. The enemy fighters, caught completely by surprise, were unable to mount an effective defense against the precision assault. Within minutes, the compound was under complete American control. Hassan and 4 of his lieutenants were captured alive, along with computers and documents that would provide valuable intelligence about future terrorist operations. The mission that had begun as a quest for justice had also become a significant victory in the broader war against terrorism. The compound fell silent except for the sound of zip ties being secured around the wrists of captured terrorists. Hassan, the mastermind behind Sarah's ambush, sat against a wall with blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, where he had been tackled during his failed attempt to escape. His eyes showed a mixture of fear and disbelief as he realized that the elite American forces he had heard about in whispered conversations had actually come for him personally. Morrison approached Hassan directly, his face calm but his eyes burning with controlled intensity. Through an interpreter, he informed the terrorist leader that this operation was justice for Sarah Martinez, the intelligence analyst who had survived his ambush against all odds. Hassan's expression changed to one of shock when he learned that the woman he believed he had killed was not only alive but had provided information that led directly to his capture. The intelligence materials seized from the compound were even more valuable than the SEAL team had hoped. Hassan's computers contained detailed plans for future attacks on coalition forces, including the locations of weapons caches and the identities of other terrorist cells operating throughout the region. This information would save countless lives and deal a devastating blow to enemy operations in Iraq. As the prisoners were prepared for transport, Morrison received another radio update from the hospital. Sarah was not only conscious but was insisting on speaking with the medical staff about her team members who had been wounded in the ambush. Despite her own severe injuries, her primary concern was for the welfare of her fellow soldiers. The doctors were amazed by her mental strength and determination to recover quickly, so she could return to duty. The extraction from Fallujah proved to be as dangerous as the infiltration had been. Enemy reinforcements were converging on Hassan's former stronghold, forcing the SEAL team to fight their way out through streets filled with hostile fighters. However, their superior training and the element of surprise allowed them to reach their helicopter landing zone without casualties, carrying their valuable prisoners and intelligence materials to safety. Back at the base, news of the successful mission spread quickly throughout the military community. Sarah's story of survival and the SEAL team's response had become legendary among soldiers throughout Iraq. The operation demonstrated the lengths that American forces would go to protect their own and ensure that attacks on coalition personnel would be met with swift and overwhelming retaliation. During the interrogation process, Hassan and his lieutenants provided information that led to the capture of dozens of additional terrorists and the discovery of major weapon stockpiles. The intelligence gathered from this single operation disrupted enemy activities throughout the region for months, preventing numerous planned attacks on both military and civilian targets. Meanwhile, Sarah's recovery continued to amaze her medical team. Despite suffering 14 gunshot wounds that should have been fatal, she was making progress that defied medical expectations. Physical therapy was painful and exhausting, but she approached each session with the same determination that had kept her alive during the ambush. Her goal was to recover completely and return to active duty as soon as possible. 3 weeks after the SEAL operation, Morrison visited Sarah in the hospital rehabilitation center where she was relearning to walk. She was using a walker and moving slowly, but her eyes showed the same fierce determination that had impressed everyone who knew her story. When Morrison told her about the successful mission and Hassan's capture, tears of gratitude filled her eyes as she thanked him for bringing justice to those who had tried to kill her team. Sarah's family had remained by her side throughout her recovery, providing emotional support and encouragement during the most difficult moments of her rehabilitation. Her younger brother, also a soldier, had requested a transfer to Iraq so he could be closer to his sister during her recovery. The Martinez family had always been close, but Sarah's survival had brought them even closer together. 6 months after the ambush, Sarah achieved a milestone that her doctors had thought impossible. She walked unassisted for the first time since her injuries, taking careful but confident steps down the hospital corridor, while her family and medical team cheered her progress. The bullet wounds had healed, leaving scars that would always remind her of that terrible day. But her spirit remained unbroken. The terrorist cell responsible for the ambush was completely dismantled, with Hassan and his key associates sentenced to life in prison. The intelligence gathered during the SEAL operation led to the capture or elimination of over 100 enemy fighters, significantly reducing terrorist activities in the Fallujah region. Sarah's survival and the subsequent justice mission had achieved results far beyond what anyone had originally imagined. 2 years later, Sarah returned to active duty with a new assignment in intelligence analysis at the Pentagon. Her experience and the insights gained from surviving the ambush made her invaluable in developing strategies to protect soldiers in combat zones. She worked closely with special operations units, including Morrison's SEAL team, to improve intelligence gathering and force protection procedures. Sarah never forgot the sacrifice made by Morrison and his team when they risked their lives to bring her justice. Their friendship, forged in the crucible of combat and recovery, remained strong throughout their careers. The story of her survival and their response became a testament to the bonds between soldiers and the lengths they will go to protect each other. The ambush that was meant to end Sarah's life instead became the beginning of a new chapter focused on preventing similar attacks on other soldiers. Her survival inspired countless people, both military and civilian, who faced their own seemingly impossible challenges. Sarah Martinez had proven that with enough determination and the support of fellow warriors, even 14 bullets couldn't destroy the human spirit.